Hello everyone and welcome back to the Menagerie. Over the course of roughly 50 years, the US government actively and forcibly sterilized over 70,000 Americans until the state of Oregon formed the last known legal forced sterilization in the US. Carrie Buck was 17 and pregnant in 1927 after being assaulted by her adoptive family's nephew. She was an honor student at her high school. Nevertheless, her underage, unmarried pregnancy, though completely against her will, justified the state in declaring her, quote, feeble-minded. Well, that and the fact that her birth mother had also been forcibly institutionalized for, quote, feeble-mindedness and, quote, sexual promiscuity. Thus, it was believed that Carrie had inherited both of these arbitrary qualifications from her mother. It's important to reemphasize that both of these labels were completely arbitrary. There was no standard IQ score or even test for feeble-mindedness, and promiscuity was viewed generally as getting pregnant out of wedlock. So, due to this, Carrie Buck was forcibly sterilized and institutionalized in the same facility as her mother. Her daughter Vivian was determined at 6 months old to be below average, because, quote, there is a look about it that is not quite normal, according to one social worker. Later on, the social worker that this quote was ascribed to denied saying it or even examining 6-month-old Vivian. Later on in her life, Vivian would also be on the honor roll of her elementary school before her death at age 8. The case of Buck v. Bell went to the Supreme Court, where Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes wrote, "It is better for all the world if, instead of waiting to execute degenerate offspring for crime or to let them starve for their imbecility, society can prevent those who are manifestly unfit from continuing their kind. 3 generations of imbeciles are enough." After being released from institutionalization shortly after her sterilization, she lived a perfectly normal life and passed away in her 70s in 1983. She passed on 2 years after the last forced sterilization occurred. Carrie's little sister was also sterilized without her knowledge under the auspices of an appendicitis surgery. She did not learn the truth of this procedure until she was in her 60s. This is all bad enough, obviously, but it gets even worse. Buck v. Bell has never been overturned by the Supreme Court. In 1942, Skinner v. Oklahoma overturned the use of sterilization as a punitive measure, so then it became carefully worded as to be utilized for treatment and not punishment. The end of these procedures was with the case Poe v. Lynchburg Training School and Hospital. This case was settled between the school and the ACLU outside of court. Thus, even though state eugenics laws have been replaced and not been utilized since, the case of Buck v. Bell itself has not been overturned to this very day. So truly, the monster we're looking at today in the menagerie is, in fact, ourselves, our own hubris and willingness as a society to commit such atrocities under the auspices of a greater social good. That's all I have for you today. Thank you all for listening. Feel free to comment and subscribe for more stories like this. You can also find a link to my YouTube page on my profile. Thank you for listening, and farewell until our next visit to the menagerie.